Hi everyone, it's Nick. Welcome back to my channel. Okay, in today's video, we are going to be ranking 10 interior design styles. These are 10 super popular interior design styles that you see really commonly used. That's why they're popular. And I'm gonna be ranking them. Is this subjective? Absolutely not. This is completely subjective. This is my own opinion. These are the 10 that I'm gonna be ranking. I'm just gonna be sitting here sharing my opinion on why I like them. I'm gonna try to give you some information. Are you gonna learn anything though from this video? Probably not, but that's part of the fun. We're just gonna sit here and chitty chat for a bit about why I like some styles and why I don't. And feel free to share what you think in the comments below, because that's what they're there for. Okay, let's get going. Okay, we're doing this Watch Mojo style, so I'm gonna do 10 all the way to number 1. 10 on my list. The least favorite of the bunch is gonna have to be Modern Farmhouse. I don't really like Modern Farmhouse most executions of this design style. I find it's looking particularly dated now because I don't think this really will go down in history as one of the most timeless design styles ever of all time. And I think I feel vindicated in a way because I've been talking about Modern Farmhouse here on the internet and how much I don't care for it for about 5 years. Now, I will say that there are some aspects of this style that work really well. I do like that it's really accessible. I think people can find Modern Farmhouse stuff everywhere. Every HomeSense clearance section, for example, every Hobby Lobby sign aisle. You know, there's lots of places. Some of it can feel really lived in, and some of it might make sense for someone who's actually living on a farm. Then there might be some use cases where this style does make sense. But for the most part, this feels like in the classic Modern Farmhouse style, just feels very suburban in nature, and it doesn't feel particularly like it completely lacks the context of actually a real farmhouse. You know, where people do like things with chickens and stuff. Do you know what I mean? Like farm stuff, planting seeds, mowing, doing things, you know, plowing fields. No one's doing that in this style house. And I think that's part of the fun of this style. There's a lot of really cheesy aspects, the word signs like I've talked about ad nauseum, but even just some things like an old milking jug, or you know what I mean? Like there's lots of little things like that don't really make sense. The all black accents everywhere, the shiplap that is used for interior use. Those types of things I think come across as really cheesy and lacking the context that one needs, I think, to really be a truly amazing, successful style. So this one is very geographically specific to a farmhouse, and therefore doesn't make sense in most use cases where you actually see it. If you've ever been in an actual farmhouse, they don't usually have the Joanna Gaines flair, you know what I mean? And that's usually, I think, what's missing in this typical style. So for all those reasons, even though there are some cute things about it that are very accessible to people, it's great for kids, you know what I mean? Like people, it's a very informal style, which people love. So even though it's got some of those things that are some redeeming qualities, I'm still gonna say it's number 10 on my list. Okay, number 9 on my list is gonna be Maximalist. This is a very new style. Well, it's not, let's be honest. It comes and goes over the years, right? There's maximalism that you can see different styles in sort of different generations, right? We've seen it come in the 70s. We've seen it, like different generations have their own sort of version of a maximalist style. And really we see this swing between maximalism and minimalism, this pendulum swing that's been going on until the beginning of time and will continue to do so, right? It's just really, minimalism is really all about kind of curating your space to really edit, to make sure that what is there is necessary. Maximalism is about filling your space with joyful things that you really love and that you really care for, and you combine them all in sort of really interesting and quirky ways, right? It's for people that love stuff, you know what I mean? Like some people love stuff, they don't see it as clutter, they just see it as like all their treasured belongings and they want to be surrounded by it. I am not that person, okay? I am not that person. If you love this style, as always, put it in your home, I don't care. But for me, it's just not really how I like to do things. I prefer a style that's a little bit more edited, a little bit more curated, and having just more smaller, more personal items, things that are really have breathing space to kind of, you know, not kind of shout at you all the time. And also I find that these maximal spaces can feel really suffocating and not particularly relaxing. I find them just sort of sensory overload, and especially this new style that's been popular in the last few years where you're mixing lots of patterns, mixing lots of color, and just really like adding all that into a space where every wall is filled with stuff. And I just feel like that doesn't create a particularly relaxing, inviting vibe for your home, which is something that I really look for in a space. So although it works for some people and they love it, and that's really great because they just love stuff and they love seeing all their belongings dripping off of the walls. That's not me, and so that is why it's number 9 on this list. Okay, number 8 on my list is gonna be postmodern. Now, this is where we start to move away from stuff I really don't like into stuff that I can appreciate different pieces of it, but I don't really care for, right? So again, I really struggled to find a couple of redeeming qualities in Modern Farmhouse, but with postmodern, I think what's really interesting about about it. I'm gonna start with what I kind of like, which is that it does challenge this sort of modern ethos of sort of function, like function first, or everything has to have a function. Like it's basically postmodern was sort of a reaction to that and was just sort of like, hey, what if we throw just whatever on the wall and see what sticks? You know what I mean? Like, let's not sort of restrict ourselves to feeling like form follows function. And instead, let's just go, let's just get creative. Let's just get weird. Let's just get wild. You know what I mean? I can appreciate that because there are some really interesting pieces that come out of the postmodern movement. The Memphis design is oftentimes seen as kind of the catalyst for really what we now sort of view as postmodernism. You know, there's some funky, weird stuff in there. And I kind of think that it really fulfilled a purpose of sort of breaking free of the rut, maybe, that modern design sort of had people in. And I think that's really cool. There is some really creative aspects of it. Now let's get to why it's only number 8 on this list and not higher. I think that it's a little too weird and juvenile for me, especially the modern sort of, or I should say contemporary sort of uses for postmodernism. I find it to be just weird for the sake of weird. And that's sometimes where postmodernism for me falls apart. So yes, like let's get on a whiteboard and think of what a chair could be, and you can start to get really creative and kind of fun and really break free of that rut. You can also create just weird crap that doesn't actually make sense. Someone emailed me and said, stop using the word crap. And I hear you and I get you and I love that you're a fan, but I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to take that feedback and park it and continue to use the word crap because I like it. Because some of this stuff is, to me, okay, it's no hard feelings, but it's sort of just stuff that is weird, like I said, for the sake of weird. It's supposed to be funky, but it doesn't actually provide any actual real human value. It doesn't provide any real utility, and these are not real chairs. Do you know what I mean? These are not chairs that anybody actually would ever really want to live in. And sometimes these pieces should be at least a little bit functional. And break free, yes, but push it too far, like a lot of this latest version of postmodernism, and you start to get really juvenile and trying too hard to be cool and different when really sometimes a chair can just be a chair. Okay, next on my list is gonna be Bohemian. Also, we're gonna throw kind of eclectic sort of in here. Here's the thing with Bohemian, which I like. So some pieces of the Bohemian style that I think are really, really cool. And that is like classic boho style is supposed to be about finding different objects and different pieces from around the world that you've collected in your own travels, right? So you go to Morocco and you grab like, I don't know, a rug, or then you go to China and you grab some interesting like plates that you found or something. And then you go and get some, I don't know, you go to the Netherlands and you grab some stuff that you found. You know what I mean? Like you're going all around the world, you're on your travels, or even locally, right? You're just like finding places and different cool artisans that make cool stuff. And then you like take it all and you bring it into your home, and it's like a true, I love that. Like I think it's a true representation of what your life is, like your life, your lifestyle, and you get to welcome people into your home, and that's really, really super cool. But I think that the execution as a result of that, because it's so funky and weird and you're grabbing things from all around the world and your different travels, is it's probably not gonna feel particularly cohesive, or the only cohesive tie is, you could argue it's worldly, or the cohesive tie is you. So if you're a person who loves your style or your home to just feel intensely personal, and that's really for you, then I think a classic boho style can be really cool. For me, I prefer to have something that feels a little bit more cohesive and something that feels like everything is sort of tied together, and I put it together, but it's got some pieces of personality, of course, that are in there, but I feel more relaxed when I don't have so much stuff that I've curated. Like I like things to be a little bit more stored away, and I'm not very sentimental, so whatever. And so a lot of functional pieces that are also really beautiful is sort of my thing. And that's why this style doesn't really work for me. The other reason I'm gonna penalize it, which is why it's number 7 on this list, is because I think that the modern, or again, those contemporary interpretations of boho, is all the funky weirdness that you get, but it sort of takes away from all that authentic sort of worldly travel piece that you get from classic boho, and instead it's just like, here's some macrame that I bought on Etsy, or you know, here's a vase that I picked up at Urban Outfitters, and you just sort of throw it together, and it kind of always has that same look. Do you know what I mean? Like it's that same sort of Southwest style rug with like a macrame on the wall, and you know, a woven or a rattan chair in the corner. It's just always looks the same, which is the opposite of what Bohemian is supposed to be. It's supposed to be not actually curated in the same way, because it's supposed to just be things you've picked up over the years and you kind of curated this really sort of weird and cool space. That's not really the modern interpretation or the one that we see recently. And that's why it's kind of took away, it's sort of a neutered version of what boho is supposed to be. And for that reason, that's why it got deducted. Classic boho might have made it higher on the list. I respect it, even if it's not my style, but I respect it. But the like new versions of it is taking all the life out of that particular design style. And for that reason, it's number 7. Okay, next up on my list is gonna be traditional, or sort of a newer traditional that we have seen being really popular in recent years, right? So this is now, I would say, it's arguably a little bit more of a transitional style that we've seen being really popular, but just these sort of traditional touches that have been really popular recently, we have seen in the last sort of few years. I think this has turned into a really elegant style. You're seeing a lot more neutral colors. You're seeing just a lot of, but still some use of color, like a lot of greens and a lot of reds and a lot of blues and things being brought in, but some more traditional elements being used. Things like panel moldings, things like really amazing, beautiful, classic light fixtures being used, more like rolled arm sofas, which are really interesting, or things with like slip covers on them, just feeling a little bit more traditional than what we have seen in the past. And I really like this style. It's not particularly mine because I'm not a traditional guy. I tend to like things a little bit more modern, as you will see as we get further down the list. But I do think though that there are elements of this style that are really, really cool. I like to see that people are sort of updating traditional, which is a little bit of an oxymoron because, you know, there's some elements of traditional that today would still feel very, very old fashioned, but I still have respect for this style because I think there's a lot of really cool parts of traditional design that you're seeing being used. Even something like symmetry, you're seeing some symmetry is very commonly used in traditional design, and you're starting to see sort of living room formats going back to a little bit more traditional sort of symmetrical space, as opposed to sort of the asymmetrical styles with all like kind of the chaise lounges and stuff that we have sort of seen in the past. So I think it's really cool to see people using sort of some traditional elements back into their home. It's not me, it's not my style. I think sometimes it feels a little cottagey and maybe a little bit stuffy for my own use. You're seeing sort of this kind of merging, I think, of modern farmhouse with some more classic traditional elements to create something that feels a little bit more contemporary, away from what we had, you know, the Hobby Lobby signs that we had seen years ago. And I think this new style is cool, even if it's not for me, and that's why it made it sort of middle of the road on this list. Okay, next on my list is gonna be mid-century modern. I think some of you are probably surprised that mid-century modern is only number 5 on this list. And I'm gonna tell you why, because I think there's some designs further down this list where use or are inspired by or have a lot in common with mid-century modern, but are maybe done in a little bit of a different way that I really enjoy. So mid-century modern, of course, comes from the mid-century, obviously, the mid, 20th century, if you were curious. And it sort of feels like 1950s all the way into like the 70s, right? And we're seeing a lot of that function sort of use for furniture pieces. So everything feels very functional. So it's sort of like form follows function. So a chair is a little bit more simple. It's a little bit more stripped down. Same with a lot of furniture pieces being used. You also, in mid-century modern design, you see a lot of like really interesting sort of colors being used and new technology being incorporated, because this is all in sort of the post-war era, World War II, if you were wondering. And right, so you see a lot more like interesting manufacturing going on because there's new technology, and you're seeing use of plywood and plastics like lucite and stuff like being used in furniture pieces, which I think is really super cool. And I always have a huge respect for mid-century modern. I think it would be difficult to argue that mid-century modern is one of, next to like traditional design and then maybe even postmodernism, as like such a massive sort of cultural movement that impacts interior design and continues in 2025 to still impact interior design. Mid-century modern, I think in some form will always be with us. And I just think it's really, really neat to see being used. It's not higher on this list because I do think for me, I tend to like a lot of natural materials being used. You've probably heard me say natural materials about 17,000 times on this channel. And that's just my preference. It's always gonna be my preference. I love the natural, simple beauty that you get from wood and stone and things like that, wool and materials like that, as opposed to a lot of these modern materials that you see often used in MCM. In addition, sometimes I think when you really lean solely into this style, it feels a little bit themey, almost like a 1950s sort of Happy Days set, which is just not really particularly what I'm going for when I'm looking for mid-century modern. I think this is a wonderful style to incorporate into other styles, which again, you'll see in this list. So I think for me, having a lot more natural materials being used, mixing it with different styles, as well as some of the color choices being a little bit less saturated. You see a lot of like funky avocado green and a lot of crazy mustards and a lot of really like rich purples and stuff being used in mid-century modern. And that changes depending on the era, the 50s versus the 70s and whatever, right? The burnt burnt oranges, right? And I don't oftentimes really love those color choices. So for me, that's why this is middle of the road number 5. I love the style in general, but there's some pieces that are, in my opinion, holding it back from being a little bit higher on the list. Just my personal preference. Like I said at the beginning of the video, it's a gorgeous style, but there are some pieces I don't love personally. Okay, number 4 on my list. This is a good segue because my next is gonna be organic modern. And again, this is a very sort of newer style, of course, but this is take all what I said about mid-century modern, and instead of the crazy bright colors, instead of the use of, you know, really interesting, cool plastics and different materials and stuff, chrome, whatever, and instead of those like manufacturing methods, like using like plywood and flat pack things and all the rest of it, like we had seen in mid-century modern with the new technologies and all the rest coming through, organic modern uses a lot of the shapes and styles that we had saw, but again, this one feels a little bit more rustic. This feels a little bit more use of natural materials, more organic shapes being used, so less sort of rigid geometrics like we see in mid-century modern. Use of natural materials being central to this one, right? So you're gonna see a lot more wool, a lot more stone, a lot more wood, and things feel a little bit rougher, a little bit more rustic, and I really love that. I just think that there's sort of beauty in imperfection, and I think you see that a lot in organic modern. This does sort of borrow a lot from a Japandi or Japanese Zen style, which we'll get to, and I think it's overall a really great execution of sort of, for me, leaning into the pieces of mid-century modern I love, while also adding in some of the other pieces that I really enjoy, like natural materials, like use of sort of natural organic shapes sometimes, more neutral color tones, earth tones, things like that, which is more my vibe. So that's why this one made it on number 4. This is a newer style, obviously doesn't have the history and the legacy that you get with mid-century modern, but just tweaks it in ways that I personally really, really love. Okay, number 3 on my list is going to be Japanese or Japanese Zen, or sometimes called just Zen style. I love this style. This is definitely an interior design style that I really love. You see a lot of sort of dark woods. You see a lot of use of earth tones. Everything is really low, the low furniture, everything feels very grounded. It's a very minimal style. Also, you see the use of like, so wabi-sabi, which is basically, I mean, you know, not to dive into all, this is much deeper than you're gonna get in a YouTube video. So obviously like you can't take, you know, entire cultures with hundreds or thousands of years of history like Japanese or Danish or any of the Scandinavian countries and basically reduce them to like a 3-minute talk on a YouTube video. Like obviously these cultures are very complex, but I will say that like wabi-sabi, which is a piece of that is incorporated in this style, is very much like seeing beauty in imperfection. And I think that oftentimes you get things with really organic textures, things are maybe broken but put back together again. I just think all that stuff is really gorgeous and timeless and beautiful and amazing, and that is why I love Japanese style. I've never been to Japan. I would love to go, please. Like well, I'm gonna say please, like you guys don't have to give me permission. I really need to go. I just need to book a plane and let's go. You know what I mean? Like I love it. I love Japanese style so much. I think it is beautiful and timeless, and you can see so many examples of this style being used around the world today, being incorporated into different styles, and I absolutely love it. It's a timeless, gorgeous, amazing style that inspired many styles since, and I think it's gorgeous and timeless, and that is why it is number 3 on this list. Okay, number 2 on my list, I really toyed between 2 and 3. These ones are really, really close. My number 1 was like, I was pretty sure on, but my number 2 is gonna be Art Deco. I would say it's a newer style, new in comparison to perhaps like some of the other styles we talked about on this list. It's not all that new, but it is a beautiful, amazing style from the 1920s. So basically this is like kind of early 20th century style. It's a very opulent style. It uses a lot of geometrics. It uses a lot of really interesting, beautiful, fabulous like marbles and luxurious materials. You see use of like ivory, which I do not condone, but you know, here you go. Fur, which I also do not condone, but there you go. Like uses of all these sort of materials being used in this gorgeous, amazing style. Super popular in the 1920s, as I said, using a lot of geometrics, a lot of really funky patterns, a lot of really bold, in-your-face, glamorous style. This is in many ways sort of a reaction to Art Nouveau that came before it, which was much more kind of, you know, use of like fairies and a little bit more organic in its shapes. And this was much more rigid. This is much more like, again, you got those geometrics, those straight lines. Use of symmetry is huge in Art Deco. This is a very gorgeous, glamorous style. When you walk into a restaurant or a bar or a hotel and it's done in an Art Deco style, it makes a statement. It feels luxurious, it feels rich, it feels special when you walk in. And although this is a style that I love and appreciate and I've been talking about on YouTube for years, and I'm so glad that it's really trendy again, because you're starting to see so much Art Deco being brought into shops now, which I love, being used all the time in new restaurants and stuff. It's fantastic. I don't think I would do it in my own home because again, for my own home, I think I just prefer a style that's a little bit more laid back, a little bit more simple, a little bit more relaxing that I'm really going to enjoy spending time in at the end of the evening. And I do think the Art Deco is a little bit intense. I mean, if you're RuPaul and you got that house, then amazing, fantastic. You're RuPaul, of course you're going to have an Art Deco or a Hollywood Regency home. But for me, not really what I'm going to do in my own home, but I have huge respect for this style. I think it is so much fun and it is so luxurious and so opulent. And I love the use of the materials that they're using because it just feels really rich and really fun. And I really enjoy that. So that is why, and again, I really struggled putting it at number 3 versus number 2, but ultimately I just love Art Deco so much. So that is why it is number 2 on my list. Okay, and then number 1, my favorite interior design style. And it's so funny because I'm not exactly sure I would do this exact style in my own home necessarily, like in a classic sense, but this is a fabulous style that has stood the test of time, and that is Scandinavian. I love Scandinavian design. I think, you know, there are so many elements of Scandinavian design that were borrowed into mid-century modern that are being used in some of the styles we talked about, organic modern. I mean, the classic Scandi spaces, you're seeing it's very, very neutral. Lots of use of gray, white, black, right? But also use of natural materials, which is why for me, I like it more than mid-century modern. So you're seeing a lot of those same shapes being used in both the design styles, but in Scandi, you're seeing a lot more like those light oak wood floors. You're seeing those natural textures, use of linen, use of cotton, use of just, it feels really light. It feels really minimal. It feels really relaxing. Arguably, depending on how it's done, it can feel a little cold and a little chilly. I prefer a little bit of a warmer palette in my own home, but that's okay because there's lots of different ways that you can do Scandi. They use a lot of pastels for colors. So typically things are a little bit more muted. Of course, Scandinavian changes. Oh, and by the way, people always say this in videos, just because it's a Scandinavian style in a classic sense doesn't mean you go to Sweden and every house looks like this, okay? Like, but this is in a classic sense, right? You don't see as many bright colors. Things are a little bit more subdued. Love those natural materials that are being used in Scandi design. It is definitely a style that it fundamentally changed, I think, in the modern world, how design is done. You're still seeing these lighting fixtures and furniture pieces. They're still being used that were designed, you know, 75 plus years ago in Sweden, in Denmark, in Finland, all these different Scandinavian countries, and they've done such a beautiful job that these are timeless designs that we're still using today. This is, in my opinion, my number 1 favorite interior design style of all time. I love it. Again, would I do exactly classic Scandi in my own home? No, but I would say if you did, it's gorgeous. And some people would argue, I'll be honest, there's some critics out there, of course, that will say that Scandi style is boring. I hear that, but there are, you know, different interpretations and different ways that you can make the style your own. So I think starting with a Scandinavian space and then wanting to add in some colors here or perhaps some different textures or whatever that you want to do, I think honestly that you can make it your own. I do recognize that for a lot of people, it's going to be really boring, and that's fine. Those people have postmodern and they have Art Deco and they've got, you know, other boho. You have other styles available to you if this isn't your vibe. But to me, I just think a classic, clean, beautiful Scandinavian space is always timeless, always inviting, and always a good time. And anybody that does say, you know, again, sometimes it can be a bit chilly with the use of grays and stuff, but if done well, it's actually rich with lots of texture and lots of interesting, beautiful wood tones that warm up the space and make it feel really homey and cozy. Ugh, just the lighting, I love it. It's my favorite style. So high five to you, to the Scandinavian countries, because it's my personal favorite. Okay, that's it for me for today, guys. I hope you really enjoyed this video. Now, this is my own personal list. I will say I'm gonna throw here to a really popular video that I did where I talked about sort of styles that are in versus styles that are out. And a lot of the styles that we talked about in this video are in and out, including Scandi, which, you know, classic Scandi hasn't been as popular in the last few years. Don't worry, she'll come back. So if you wanna check out this video, I will link it here, and I will see you all in the next one. Thanks a lot, bye.